All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your time. My name is Daniel Cervenka. I am the CEO and founder of a company called The Convergence. The Convergence is a creative impact studio, and we engage different creative mediums to deal with problems around the world. We're focused on climate, culture, and capacity, and we're delighted to be here with you all today for this session, this special session. But before I get into this, just a few words to open this space for us today. It is really my distinct pleasure to welcome you here for the Mapping the Capacity Building Ecosystem for Climate Mobility session. We're here to talk about a subject that is not easy. It is a subject that some choose to ignore, but also some choose to take action and address it head on. We're talking about climate mobility. Climate change affects and will affect everything we do. And its effects are felt from the deepest points of our oceans to the tallest tips of the mountains. These effects have a profound impact on the daily lives of all the people around the planet. But we're not facing only environmental risks, but deep impacts into and onto our cultures around the world, our heritage, and therefore through those also our identities will be affected, and our identities and who we truly are as people, and they will be challenged by this challenge that's up ahead. But today we're going to explore paths in which we can prepare ourselves for the upcoming changes and challenges, and to minimize their negative impacts on our cultures, identities, by building capacity for climate mobility. And we'll do that together. And I'll explain a little bit more about the format of today's event. But first and foremost, I'd like to thank the PCCP for hosting and opening this space for us and inviting us to collaborate and co-create here. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. I'd love to thank our partners and co-organizers, the Global Center for Climate Mobility, for participating in this session as well. And now, without further ado, I would love to invite to the stage His Excellency, President Carlos Alvarado Quesada, to deliver his remarks and open the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the gentleman also that's going to help me with this. Better? Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share my own journey with the topic of climate mobility and why I believe it's so critical to build capacity around it, and why I think the only way to do it is doing it together. When I started my journey as a president of Costa Rica in 2018, we did lots of work in the part of climate change. We've launched the first decarbonization plan. We pushed for the 30 by 30. We expanded the protected areas around Cocos Island. And on the other hand, we had to deal with refugee situations, brothers and sisters from Nicaragua fleeing as refugees, political refugees, also in mobility during COVID for the harvest of coffee. And then my constitutional term ended up in 2022. No re-election in Costa Rica. And then in 2022, in July, I was invited to a panel, a forum in the margin of before the General Assembly, and a couple of gentlemen said, Mr. President, or in my being now a former president, they said, we would like you to get involved in the intersection between climate change and migration. And I have to be very honest, this is 2022. And I ask, what's the intersection between climate change and migration? I mean, I have worked in climate change, I have worked in migration, and imagine, at that level, before that, I was never exposed to the nexus between those two. And for me, that was the beginning of a new journey. And I said, not proudly, but I say this part of my story because it evidences the need to build capacity around these topics. Getting involved with the Global Center for Climate Mobility, I understood that one of the first things you require, obviously, as many policy-making tasks, is to look what the science behind it is. So many of the partners, NASA, Columbia University, governments, local governments, started to rally around it. And the data, it's staggering. For example, sea level rise. In the next couple of decades, it's expected that the sea level rise in average is going to increase in 0.5 meters. Many will say, well, that's not much. For others, it depends on whether its nation is going to exist or not, as to our friends of Marshall Islands here or Tuvalu. That's the difference between existence and non-existence. Drought in Somalia, meaning mobility of people because they cannot have a livelihood in their agriculture. Or in other places like the north of Nigeria, that people have to move to areas where herders, where they traditionally are not, but then they got into areas of farmers. And many things that media portrays of ethnic conflict is a climate change-derived conflict. We've seen floodings more recently, hurricanes. Recently, when we saw Hurricane Milton in the US, putting at the same time 2 million people without electricity. I cannot wonder also, that is a reflection of other realities, perhaps not so put into the spotlight, like when Dominica lost 100% of its GDP to a hurricane. Hurricanes that are getting rougher because of climate change. Similarly to Bahamas. And this means displacement. We met recently with delegation of CARICOM. We were talking about these topics, and a diplomat said, I need to break protocol. I was displaced 7 years ago, and I'm still waiting to go back to my home. This is what climate mobility is about. Sometimes it's something that has already happened, but has not been framed under this conceptual umbrella. In other places, it's an ongoing process, like in Fiji. Part of an adaptation plan, it's a plan of relocation, putting people in other areas so they can protect. Bangladesh, Central America, you name it. One of the exciting things I found also about this field is that, different to others, it's not like you could say, go find some reference in library or some papers, because this is relatively recent in some regards. And it's knowledge that is built on the go. So there are questions, again, drawing from the experience of my own ignorance. 2023, I was telling the team, I was invited to a panel on climate mobility and heritage. And again, what's the intersection? That was my question. Then the panel was very clear. All the sacred places, all the historical places that eventually might disappear. And how are we going to carry that memory, that collective and cultural memory, to present and future generations? So in this session, what I've been explaining is that it's a session of sharing. Data is important, but I believe also the sharing of experiences, because as we share, is that we grow collectively. We're building a community of knowledge and practice as we speak and as we go. By sharing, we learn and we accelerate our processes of adaptation. Recently, we talk a lot about, and by the way, when we speak about climate mobility, one concept that I invite you to explore in is embracing complexity. This is not a linear topic. We've seen our friends of Tuvalu at the same time seeking agreement with Australia to have a safe place to eventually go, while at the same time defending the right to stay, because we don't want to go. And that's the kind of things that have to expand our understanding while addressing the topic. It's an ongoing process, but I think we need to embrace courageously, because as we see it's happening, sea level rise is going to affect 1 billion people in the years to come, 1 billion. And my final thought on this is, what I found more useful in this field is listening. It's listening. Listening from the stories, listening from the data of the scientists, especially policymakers have to do lots of the listening. Listening to the impacts on the business community. Most of the infrastructure, productive infrastructure of most of the countries is on the coastlines. In terms of ports, hotels, tourism, what's going to happen eventually with that? And intersections with the finance community. How are we going to finance all the necessary adaptations, this being the cup of finance? How are we going to finance that transformation on a process that is already going? Those are the questions that I invite you to have at the back of your minds while experiencing these sessions. And I want to thank the organizers, obviously the GCCM and all the partners, especially the people that are here to share on this capacity building session. If you go out of this room knowing at least one thing new you were not aware before, that's success. Thank you very much.
So a big thank you to His Excellency for his opening remarks. It was wonderful to hear the insights and also drawing the connection and the importance between mobility, climate mobility, and culture, and really what is at stake here. I also really appreciated the importance and emphasis on the collaborative approach and the importance of collaboration as one of the building blocks towards structured and well-designed change, I think. I'm not finding the right word here, but you get where I'm going with this. I would love to now, before we proceed into the next part of our event, explain a little bit more about how we envision it to actually go. We had fantastic opening remarks. Sorry, you pass me the clicker. Thank you. We heard fantastic opening remarks. We'll have a fireside chat with two distinguished guests. But the latter half, or the most important part of this experience, is actually the time when we start to talk together. And even though I am on stage now, I want you to think of me as being in the audience with you. Today is about sharing, it's about collaboration, it's about sharing the little bits that we know individually about climate mobility and sharing those with each other. And we'll explain a little bit about how we're going to do that, where we can do that, as we proceed with the program. But again, I invite you now to think about a few things that will help us to open up the space and the discussion in the latter half. I would love to invite you to imagine a place that you love, a place that you cherish. Just close your eyes for a second, just think about it. Just imagine that place that you adore. It could be your home, it could be anything, a place in your heart. Just hold on to that for just a second. Now, I invite you to imagine that you will never be able to return to that place again. Now, the last part I'd like to invite you to is to think about the questions that came to your mind when you addressed that feeling. What are you asking for or about? What comes to your mind? What do you need? What are you seeking out? Now think about that. I'll leave you with this for now, but think about that, and this is something that we would like to go into in the second half. Not so metaphorical, but we'd really love to open a space for practical sharing of tools, resources, research, anything that is relevant to preserving the beautiful places that we love, that we call home, as beautiful as they are now. So, without further ado, we'll proceed into the next part of our program. And I would love to invite to the stage two of our guests, Miriam Shapira, please join us on stage, and Sain Taepo from Kiribati to please join us for a short fireside chat. A quick discussion. Hello, hello. Amazing. Microphones. Check, check. Slide it up.
Yeah,
Awesome.
got it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you for sharing your experiences and knowledge with us here on this short fireside chat. This is an opening to our next segment, and we'll have a short conversation to preface what's to come. We'll start nice and easy. Just give us a little introductions of who you are, what do you do, and also where you're from, and why do you love what you do. So please, just introduce yourselves. Please, Sain.
Okay, so I'll go first. Kamnapen in Maori, that is our traditional greeting from where I come from. I come from Kiribati. My name is Sain, by the way, and I come here today as one of the Rising Nations Initiative delegate under the Global Center for Climate Mobility. And for those of you that have not heard about Kiribati before, Kiribati is made up of 33 small islands that are scattered in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And it's very hard for me at times to tell people where I come from because you can barely see it from a map. And you have to, if you're using a phone, you have to like zoom in a lot of times to be able to see where it is. But today I come from the mainland, which is called South Tarawa. And just one thing I want to put out, some of the uniqueness of our countries is that we have the northern side of Kiribati, we have the southern side of Kiribati, we have the central and other remote islands of Kiribati, and each of these has unique cultures of their own. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Miriam, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Miriam Shapira, and I am the Senior Advisor on Culture and Heritage for the Global Center for Climate Mobility. I'm from the United States, from Los Angeles, California. And I am really excited to be here, particularly to share the stage with my friend Sain, who I was fortunate enough to visit in Kiribati this summer, and she was a wonderful guide. So thank you to Daniel and Ilya for inviting us to speak today.
Very much our pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you to both for sharing. And, let's explore this topic a little bit together. I think let's start with the harder part and a little bit broader. What are some of the obstacles in developing accessibility and capacity for climate mobility? How can we do it better? What are some of the challenges now? Miriam,
sorry.
perhaps, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. I focus particularly in my space on preservation of culture and heritage. And the thing about culture and heritage is I think it often gets left out of these conversations because it's not easily quantifiable. We're not talking about inches of rain or numbers of typhoons in a season. We're talking about people and how they live their lives and what it means. I've been fortunate to work closely with the country of Tuvalu, and in Tuvalu, culture is sharing your meal with strangers like myself. It's opening people up to new experiences like eating straight from the land and the sea. It's fresh fish, reef fish, and clams, and it's taru and pandanus, and it's the kind of culture that showers you with gifts when you leave at an airport and makes you homemade dresses that are traditional and cultural and so meaningful. And these are things that I don't know how to put a number on. And I don't know how to acknowledge them if the space where they exist and the reason for existing, that being the land and sea that they come from, are changing. And so that's sort of the big question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The question is, kind of opening up the conversation, thinking a little bit about the obstacles or challenges that we're facing. We're kind of discussing the issue of climate mobility or its accessibility.
Yeah, just some of my perspectives in the topic of climate mobility. And in the past few days in the climate mobility pavilion, we've been a panel in different sections, and we've just been talking about, sea level rise and how that's affecting us. And for us in the Pacific Islands, especially in my country, we're only 3 meters above sea level, and our situation is kind of similar with Tuvalu. And just the topic of climate mobility, what we're advocating at COP and in the climate space is that we want to stay. Like, we don't want to move anywhere else other than where we're born, or where our ancestors are, or where there's all of our cultures. And just talking about rising sea levels and the idea that our countries will be underwater in the near future. Just thinking about how our cultures and heritage will be preserved, like if we're going to move to another country. Those are some of the things that I have this climate anxiety about, and just thinking about how we will be able to preserve culture and heritage of our nations, and how we as the youths from our countries, what can we do to preserve and keep these cultures alive just as it is generations ago and for the generations to come. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. Just hearing you speak about it, I come from a landlocked country, so the privilege, it's a privilege I never thought was of value, in the sense that being landlocked, we don't have seas. I complained about that, but now hearing your story, it really touches a person in a different way, and well, I hope that today's session can kind of help us advance on some of these issues a little bit more. But anyway, sorry. What opportunities, Miriam, can we engage to scale support and and bring more support to the communities and to the topic at large?
It's a great question. At the Rising Nations Initiative, we're working on several possible angles for preserving cultural heritage, but it is very much, as you said, a discussion in progress. And I think there are lots of opportunities, especially for collaboration and to engage with skills of a lot of people. But one of the programs I'm working closely on is a UNESCO World Heritage application for the country of Tuvalu. We are closely supporting the government in these efforts, and a big part of that is sort of a deep dive into the culture, into what makes it unique and special. Traditional fishing techniques, the fatele, dancing and song, that they use to tell stories from their ancestors. This is a start. It is not the answer. It is not the same thing as being there. Another initiative we're working on is what we like to call a digital heritage project, a digital repository, with the idea being that we want to save as much as we can in whatever format we can. So from the very basic side of preserving archival documents so that all government records are saved, up to video recordings of conversations with elders, to dance, to art, many, many things. We are working on them, but I'm really excited for a chat like this, working with you as a filmmaker, because I think there are so many opportunities to bring skill sets on the ground and to teach people on the ground how to document their own heritage, because frankly, this should be shared by the people whose culture this belongs to. It is not my story to tell, it is theirs. And the best way to do that is to enable people on the ground and empower them to, and give them a platform, really, to share that more widely.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing that, and that makes me think a little bit. You know, the application for with UNESCO for Tuvalu. You know, if that is a mechanism that we should deploy for all the sites, and maybe that's something we can chat about more after. But saying a little bit more, I'd love to hear a little bit more from your perspective, and also being here representing younger generations and the future generations also of Kiribati. Where's the support lacking? What do you think we should try to do? What would help you to feel more empowered to continue the important work and incredible work that you're doing already? But yeah, what could we do?
Sure, that's a very good question. Well, I'm part of one of the first youth-led organization in Kiribati called Tungaru Youth Action. And that's the first, and we hope there will be many more in the future. And in the youth organization that I'm a part of, I'm also on the side. I work voluntarily as a member of the youth organization, but I also work full-time as the UNICEF's national volunteer, working as a youth and adolescent engagement officer. So youth engagement is at the heart of the work that I do, especially in the climate space. And pretty much, the experiences in the small, well, I want to say small island developing states, like in the big ocean states that we're in. There's a lot of work that we could do on the ground that are mostly youth-led, but we lack the resources to do that. The technology. Just recently, before coming here, I was part of one of the young panels representing my organization as well, working on one of the first digital NGO in our country as well, talking about digital literacy. And there's a lot of ways, just we need more capacity on technical advice on adaptation activities, because most of the activities that we've been doing for mostly in our organization is for now is just focusing on capacity building on climate change, noticing that there's very low climate education in our country. So capacity building on what climate change is about, and then on the work, for example, adaptation activities. We're mostly focused on mangrove planting, coral planting, but hopefully we'll be able to get more support, not just financial support, but any other supports. Listening now to what the RNI initiatives are on, especially safeguarding our culture. We might think about digitalizing our culture in the future as well. But just more support on capacity building for youths in our country to be able to lead youth-led activities in our country in this fight for climate change. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Can we try to now, as we segue into the latter half of this session, can we, just for the audience, and again, I invite you to go back to that question that we talked about, that place you love that comes to your mind, some of the questions that you ask yourself about that. As a preface to that, what are some examples of resources and tools that may be already available now? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just something that comes to mind. Tsin, you mentioned your organization, but anything else that comes to mind? This is really what we'll be doing together very shortly. So, yeah, something else that others should know about when it comes to climate mobility. You can start, perhaps, if something.
Sure. We've started compiling toolkits, I suppose that they're called, that are educational documents made in conjunction with people on the ground that provide background on climate change and ways to be further involved and ways to be engaged. My colleague Lukman is here, who was the author of a youth toolkit for Africa that I hope you'll get to speak on later.
Absolutely. Thank you.
For me, it's really hard to talk about that because our country's position at the moment is to stay, and climate mobility So most of the activities that we're doing, or the things that I'm familiarized with that's going on in our country, is that just plans, mostly adaptation plans, national adaptations plans, disaster risk management plans. So yeah, I couldn't say more about what other plans, and I think that's like the gap between youth organizations like us with the government people, with our government, who like would have more idea of what's going on in the country. But for us, as you know, a youth organization on the ground, we're just doing what we can, using the resources that we can to work on the problems that we see, that instead of complaining that it's happening, we find a way around it, like just seeing if there's grants available, because we're a non-profit organization. We don't have the funds, so we either do fundraising or we look for grants that are available for us to be able to make action.
So on that note, that was a perfect example. Thank you for sharing that. We'll to definitely talk with Lukman more about the toolkit momentarily. But in regards to what Sain was just sharing, let's get our heads together and start thinking about what could help. Are there grants that you know? Are there organizations that issue grants? Is there an organization that could issue grants that we should know about, that we could talk to start providing resources and sharing those with one another? That really is the preface for what's to come next. Thank you so much for the chat. I don't know how we can continue arranging this. We can stay on stage. We can also move down. I want this second half of the event to be very relaxed and open for discussion. So maybe we can come down or move around a little bit. Really, just to be a little bit more in the collective here. There's a few more slides I'll walk you through before we jump into this short knowledge sharing experience or workshop. But before we go into it, I would love to actually invite Lukman to share a little bit more about GCCM's work and their efforts and work towards building capacity through, compiling these toolkits. So just come to the stage, really nice and easy, please.
Thank you so much.
Please, wherever, if you want to join us here,
okay.
It's really open.
Yeah.
Just share a little bit. Introduce us to the concept of this toolkit and what it's for and how it was put together.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and also thank you to my colleagues for the excellent support. So the guidebook is basically an effort by young people on the continent. So largely, number one, we have three key objectives. Number one is to advance young people's knowledge and understanding of climate mobility. And I think you will agree that it's a new topic. We still have a lot of capacity building to do, a lot of effort, not just for some of us that come to COP, but people on the ground. So there is a whole lot of work to do. So we thought that this document or this guidebook can help young people that are curious enough to understand the topic, can at least deep dive. It might not be, and it's not a technical document. It's a document that is written very easily, that you can easily understand. So that we ensure that it is not technical for maybe something you're writing for an expert. So it's quite very simple to understand. So secondly, is to also, as a young person that dive into this document, is to, secondly, you can try as much as possible to identify your role. What exactly are those roles you have to play as a young person advancing or addressing climate mobility, either in your own community, either in your country, or at a regional level? So what are those roles you have as a young person? So we try to identify that. But the third one, which I think is important for young people, including myself, is how can you pick up a career path in the climate mobility space? We do a lot of activism, volunteerism, and as a young person, when you start picking up career, you drop things that really matters to your heart because you have to feed, right? So, but we thought that you can also make a living while also still doing what you love in the climate mobility space. And what we try to do in the book is to point out those skill sets you need to pick a career in the climate mobility space. So either you want to be a consultant, either you want to be a geographer, either you want to be a statistician. So irrespective of a background, there is a role for you to play in the climate mobility space, and you will also make a living. So, and of course, it's focused on Africa, but every young person should actually dig into the book, because in the end, it's for us to be able to identify these things, and we have a role to play. And we can't at every time wait for organizations to put money in our pocket or to fund our initiative. But we also need to understand first, and our goal is to ensure that at least you can have that knowledge base, you can put your expertise out there, and we become indispensable in addressing this crisis. So that's basically our goal in this document, and if you dig dive into it, we have a lot of examples, a lot of insights for young people. And I will pick just one, just not to waste time, is specifically on capacity building, the second goal, which is to identify your role. If for you to be able to know exactly what you're doing or what you want to do in this space, you need to build capacity. You need to know that either you want to be, for instance, some colleagues are working on doing summer classes or summer courses. That is something young people need to do, or either you need to be a part of those driving green initiatives. You know, we need to identify, but you cannot do that without having the right capacity, but you cannot do that without writing the right knowledge. So these are the things that we actually try to deep dive in the book. But I invite you, not just African youth, but every young person out there that are interested in climate mobility should go through the book. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lukman. Thank you for sharing this, and thank you also for doing the work and providing the stepping stones for others to continue. And this was a fantastic example. I really appreciate the focus on the ability to actually earn a living doing that, and focusing on that so that there is a lasting long-term engagement, beyond the resources and tools and fundamental information that you have there as well. So thank you for that. Now, let's continue the conversation, again, now in a little bit of a looser format. The goal of this session is to collect some of these ideas and resources that are out there, like the grants that Saint could use, like the toolkits that Lukman has developed, and bring them together and make them available to all of us. And do that now, but also to continue beyond this event. So just a little introduction of a past time when we've done this. We actually have members of the team here from the CCAT group. We did such an experience in Thailand once before, where we gathered together and collaboratively developed a toolkit of resources that at that instance was designed for the sustainable production of events in Thailand, but we brought ideas, organizations, and resources together. Now, we are going to try to do that together here today, but for climate mobility. So here is a little QR code, and then let's get into a discussion about this. And please scan the QR code, and it will take you to a portal where you can share a link to something that you find important or relevant that others should know about. So let's start doing that. And I would love to also see if anybody here in the audience would be willing to share an answer to the questions that we've asked before. What is that place that came to your mind, the place that you love? Would anybody be willing to share with us that place? Anybody? Someone?
Thank you so much. My name is Alexa Silva. I'm also coming with the GCCM. I'm part of the youth delegates. And actually, this question felt very emotional for me because I'm from Costa Rica. Part of my family is from Colombia. And actually, part of the things that I do is to explore and actually research on the process of relocating people when they move from one country to another, due to many reasons, but usually we go to more vulnerable places. And my family and my communities have been relocated several times. So I thought about the beach of Costa Rica, and I thought about that place where I'm not anymore. And yeah, also it's very difficult for me because nowadays we're having some hurricanes in Costa Rica, and exactly to the new place that my family has been on, it's a place that we're experimenting a lot of floodings and all of these situations, including landslides. So based on the group chat and based on my family communications, they even told me that I might not be able to go back to my house. So I came here actually thinking that I was gonna go back, but I might not be able to be back because of the landslides. So yeah, thank you for that question, and thank you also for listening.
Thank you for sharing with us. Is there anybody else that would like to share their place of love that came to their mind?
Talofa. My name is Kato Bekia. I am from Tuvalu. The place that I want to share with you is the beach that I grew up on. Growing up, I love rugby. So me and my friends used to play rugby on this beach. So my parents said I have to move away for 3 years because of education. Learn more rugby in Fiji, and then when I return home, I've noticed that the beach that we used to play rugby on has disappeared, and that's why I am doing this work as a climate activist because of the place that I love called home. Tatai. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Please, anybody else? Maybe one more person, two more people. This is really more of an open space to share. If you want to.
Sure. If I can go.
Please.
So I mentioned this the other day. One of the cultures that we have in Kiribati, as a first timer going to one of the islands of Kiribati, one of our traditions is that you should have a round trip on the island. And because our islands are so small, the whole round trip could take maybe an hour or 2 hours, or it could be 3 hours. But in this round trip, one local man would come along with whoever's going on the round trip. We call it the island protocol. And in this round trip, this local man will show some of the ancient, like some places of cultural value. And these places could be shrines. And then every time we go to each of the shrines on the island, this local man could tell a story of the shrines, how it happened, like whatever happened. It could be related to the tales of how the shrines were in that place in the first place, but also due to climate change and especially with the rising seas, some of these places of cultural values where there's like these very, very valuable shrines, they're no longer there anymore. So that's a loss of our culture and traditions as well, because those places are very special places. They tell a lot of stories of our ancestors, and that's in all of the islands. That's some is been experienced in the 33 Atoll Islands, and with the projections that NASA has now with the rising seas, that gives me worries. I have this anxiety that in the future we might not be able to have those island protocols anymore because there's not much there to tell people stories about whatever's been there. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, we've heard a few stories now and of a few places that we must protect, and I think it's not the individual effort here. It's a collective effort. It is really for all of us to participate in the process. And so maybe as we continue exploring a few more of these stories, I really invite you to try to share a little that you know, something that may help people that are facing these circumstances. Again, they could be opportunities, it could be a job posting, it could be another toolkit, the grants that Zain has mentioned. Anything that comes to mind so that we can really make this available and co-create this knowledge hub. Please.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Raymond Zulu from Zambia. I'm the founder and executive director of a youth-led organization called Youth Alliance for Climate and Healthy. So in line with climate mobility, what we have done, currently we are running a project that we have called Climate Change Knows No Borders, because we understand that the impacts of climate change has transcended across borders, and it has also made people to move from one place to another. So we have incorporated how our climate change advocacy works, integrating climate change advocacy works with the, mental health issues, mental health support. So we are helping the people who are affected, the people who are vulnerable, the populations that are on the move by providing mental health and psychosocial support to them. Not only that, but we have also provided sexual and reproductive health and rights, because we understand that these people, as they are being subjected to the impact because of climate mobility, they are also being subjected to a lot of health risks, sexually transmitted diseases and unplanned pregnancy, such kind of things. So we have incorporated mental health support and of course sexual and reproductive health and rights to help to build adaptability and resilience as we are forging ahead to fight against climate change. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That I think kind of opened up the scope of our conversation quite a bit. And if I can invite you, please share it with us. If you can, use the QR code, drop the link to your website or any other organization perhaps that also does something similar. Is there anybody else who'd like to share? Actually, if there is a solution that you're working on, yeah, there, please, in the back.
Hi, I'm not going to talk about my own organization, but I want to say that in coming here to COP, I put in a proposal for a side event. And then they paired me up with an NGO from Bangladesh called Friendship. And we're going to do this side event on Tuesday. So I had to meet them, and which is the beauty of COP, that you get to talk to people and understand things from their perspective that you've never met before. And actually, I've been living 19 years in Singapore, so I'm not so far from Bangladesh. And I did know a lot about the flooding from the south of Bangladesh, but I didn't realize what they're doing. And this NGO has 10,000 young people working that they've trained, and so much of their landmass is flooded 2 and 3 times a year now that they have been building schools that they can take down and fold up in 2 hours and pack on a raft. And this has become like the way of life. This is what they described to me. I learned all this from them. Yeah, that they've trained the young people on how to build rafts out of banana trees. They have 8 medical ships circling because the flooding issues are so frequent. And I just want to tell you also that we're doing this side event on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I have a flyer for it, but when I met this NGO, there's a lot of like late 20-year-olds working with them. So I'm kind of just letting them, I did a lot of planning for the workshop, but I'm kind of just letting them handle it. You know, because they were so impressive, they were so knowledgeable, and their plan and what they're implementing on the ground is just so complex and shocking to me that this is a way of life now. It's not thought of as an extreme event. It's the way they live. So I invite you to come and take a flyer and come to our workshop. It's going to be based on drawing and discussions, and you can meet these impressive people that I had the opportunity to meet here at COP.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. And I guess invite everybody to also join that event. If they can, please pass the flyer around. And if you can, share the organization with us as well so we can learn about it. Drop the link there. That's really the whole point of this experience. You guys see this in action now. This is it. This is it. The little bits of knowledge that everybody has is that one organization that builds foldable schools that we didn't know about. It's, you know, and it's the toolkit that Lukman has designed, and it's the work that you're doing, the work that you're doing. That's really what this idea of the knowledge sharing is for, to build collective capacity, because to discover these solutions, it's tough. You have to search on the internet, and you don't even sometimes know how to ask to find the answer that you need. So this is how we can do that and make it easier for each other without, you know, the struggles of not knowing how to ask. Please, but there's another person who'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you so much for the floor. I think there's a way that I think is important to start is we're here at the Paris Committee on Capacity Building, and that has its own institutional language. But I think it's important to start thinking more about knowledge and learning co-creation. We heard about that at the previous session, this kind of collaborative, and just like you said, the pieces of knowledge that are in different places, bringing those together in different constellations around a particular problem is a better way to do capacity building, because the former suggests that there's kind of a unidirectional component, like I'm showing up, especially someone like me, showing up in a climate vulnerable country and saying, right, now here's how we're going to do things in order to fix it. And the experience that we've had working on human rights-based approaches to climate mobility at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute has focused heavily on this knowledge co-creation process, where we bring a particular kind of knowledge, which is the human rights-based approach. We had a session on it here this morning, using a framework for integrating human rights and gender equality. But it's the expertise comes from multi-level, multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral engagement. And I think especially in a panel like this, what's often missing even in that kind of a framing is young people. So often when we think about multi-level, international, national, subnational, multi-stakeholder, it's civil society, it's private sector, it's academia, but youth is often missing. And I think GCCM has done a lot to bring youth to the table, and we have Zain as an example of that, and Lukman as well with the work that you've done on the handbook. And what you said about the handbook is really interesting, because it resonates with some collaborations that we've had with the European delegation of youth to the COP, who really want to have the language and conceptual support on what is climate mobility. I'm just at this in the Capacity Hub earlier today, 2 sessions ago. We had just the primer on what are the dimensions of human mobility. We've got migration, displacement, planned relocation, immobility, the right to remain. And in Samoa, we heard at another panel an initiative from a teacher there to support students to learn climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction, so that people can be active in finding solutions. So it's not so much transferring solutions from a pre-packaged kind of model, but working together with tools. So I think it's great to consolidate those tools in certain places and then find ways of learning together so that we can figure out super complex dynamics in local context. Thank you.
I want to echo what you said. I spend a lot of time in my own organization's booth, and the panelists that come here often say, I'm going to speak on an identical panel at another booth down the hall in an hour. And it's a little frustrating because I feel like sometimes we're all these silos trying to recreate the wheel, and there's so much knowledge within this building. And I have to say, it's really inspiring to be invited to speak here for that very reason, because I feel like there are so many people that I have never met before, and working together, there are solutions to be found. So thank you for raising.
I can only echo that, please. Anybody feel free to jump in. We're running up on time, so this is really, the last few minutes for us to share with each other. Please drop that piece of knowledge to the QR code. We'll try to circulate that around with everyone who has shared as well after. But please.
Thank you for this discussion. My name is Lauren Grant, and I'm the founding executive director of the Beyond Climate Collaborative and the International School on Climate Mobilities. So we've spent the last 3 years running this online school thinking about how we can exchange knowledge on climate-related mobilities and immobilities. And I think one of my biggest takeaways is a continuous question of how can we create a culture of valuing that all people have knowledge and wisdom in relation to this phenomena. Climate change is really that everything, everywhere, all at once phenomena, but so is mobility, migration, displacement. So I think just thinking a little bit more about the sensitivity around leveling the playing field for knowledge to be exchanged in a more equal and equitable way and creating more forums for those discussions to happen. I think oftentimes groups of people that are historically disadvantaged or marginalized or oppressed don't often have a microphone to hold in their hand, but also don't feel so comfortable to speak in it when they do have one. So I think also acknowledging that confidence in the knowledge and the wisdom that we all hold is a huge part of this project to actually ensure that we can all be listened to and heard in the advancement of solutions.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's excellent, and I totally agree with you. I think it's important to find a way to consolidate existing effort, and also, I just also want to mention that when we talk about knowledge, I think there is one part we are missing, which is on the part of our policymakers. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of policymakers on the continent of Africa, and I can tell you there is a lot of knowledge gap on their path. And if you're expecting this set of policymakers to make budgets, to make efforts to address issues that we are talking about, we need to direct our policy, our knowledge efforts to them as well. So not just for young people, but also for people that are duty bearers. So, and I think it's left for us to figure it out how we are going to do that. Interestingly, GCCM, we have our deep dive effort in Africa, where we do a lot of on-ground consultation, and during this consultation, we try as much as possible to analyze and make them understand what climate mobility is. So I think this is also a task to everyone. We should not just focus on young people. We need to also try as much as possible to work with policymakers to build their knowledge on this important but also complex crisis. Yeah, thank you.
That's a really good point. I feel like we oftentimes think about policymakers as those that should know, but that doesn't mean that they do know. I guess that's another opportunity for us to try to share more in the right places. We are running up on time. I would love to invite everybody just once more, to share one little piece of knowledge with us, something, an organization, your organization, whatever it is that relates to climate mobility, something that others should know. And I think we will close here. Any closing words that you'd like to share, saying, Miriam? You don't have to, but if you'd like to, Lukman, of course, as well, please, now is the time.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for sharing and participating. It's really inspiring and refreshing to have a dialogue.
Thank you. Well, a huge round of applause to all of you for being here and participating, and of course to our speakers as well. Thank you. This is it's an ongoing effort. It's an experiment in how we can this tool. It's an experiment on how we can share knowledge with each other more effectively and openly and make it accessible. So thank you for participating in this. Thank you again for sharing. Thank you for your stories and your hard work, and mostly for your time, which is the the most valuable thing we all have. So thank you.